What if your deepest pain wasn't meant to break you, but shape you? What if the suffering you've endured wasn't quite the end, but the beginning? Today, we sit down with a man who has walked through the fire, Garrett George. From battling demons that could have consumed him to transforming struggle into strength, Garrett has turned pain into purpose. How do you find meaning in this mess? How do you break free from the cycle of escape and lean into something greater? This isn't just a conversation, it's a wake-up call. Stay with us. This one you just don't want to miss. It can change your life.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back, my dear friend Garrett George. We've been hearing your name a lot because you sent us some of our. Best. I always say some of my favorite guests, but only because they raise the hair on my partner's arms. He's always either crying or getting goosebumps from all the people you sent us. So I just have to say, it's nice to get the man behind the scenes in front of the scenes for a change, because I know you like to live behind the scenes, but it's nice to get you in front of our camera again. But we're very blessed to have you back, my friend. You're just one of my favorite people on the planet. So thank you for having us back.
Thank you guys for having me back. I do want to ask you now, who else has been on the show? How many have we put on the show? I know Matt and Tyson and Jeremy. Who else? Mantle.
Yeah, I think quite a few.
What was the guy in the wheelchair? What's his name?
Tyson Deaver? Or was that
the Tyson Deaver, Matt Blanchard?
Oh, Tyson. Yeah.
Blanchard?
Yeah.
Matt.
And Mason, and then lately, Matthew, and we always joke in the show, if you've heard some of them, I'll get a text from Garrett that says, "You need to meet this guy," and that's all I get. and when we first knew each other, I'd be like, "Oh my, I don't do cold calls." And I'd call you all frustrated, and you'd be like, "Just trust me." Well, now I don't even blink anymore. Now I go, "Okay, it's good."
He said that last week with Vince Ruiz, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It was another one. It's just like, oh, here we go again.
Have we got Tyson Deaver on yet?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's fantastic.
All right. Yes. I've lost count, man. I
know, so weird, but it's all right. But the reason we're having on today, you're going in a new mission, and it's and you're going to be starting your own podcast, your new website. But the whole thing is you're going after a theme, turning pain into purpose, and that's such a powerful and profound process. And what was it? What was kind of, since the last time we talked, we got some of your background, but what's kind of the process of you deciding this is the direction you want to go? There's a ton of people suffering, especially the last 3 years with social media and internet and life and first responders. What actually is driving the realization that we need to turn this pain into purpose and do more with it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would first of all say that I've had to do that myself. And this is how I find purpose. This is where I found my purpose. And it's like Sam said, we're talking about, and this is all pretty fresh. I realistically, I'm glad it took this long to get on the podcast again with you guys. And realistically, I'm not set and ready, but I'm open to talk about it with you guys today. But serving the unserved. There's people out there that we run into. I know we have opportunities every day to make a difference in somebody's life, and I'm just taking advantage of those. And I don't hesitate. If I feel my heart's moved to make a difference in somebody's life, I'm going to do it. We have the network to be able to do that. So after 11 years of coordinating outdoor adventures and reunions and experiences, I've worked with 2 other organizations very closely, Trinity Oaks and Legacy Farmstead. But I realistically, I got outside of their missions. My heart was moved, and I've just decided that I have to start my own with a team of my own. If my heart's moved in a certain direction to do something for somebody, I'm going to do it. And I need the support of the team that's around me. And so that's why I'm starting G2 Impact.
Was there a specific moment or experience in your life where you realized that pain could be more than just suffering?
But that pain could be more than just suffering. Help me understand.
So, turning pain into purpose, where you're turning pain into something other than just suffering. What was your talk about some of that?
Well, that's easy. I mean, you look at the recipients. If anybody's seen anything that I've got to be a part of with the organizations that we work with, these individuals deserve what they experience. And you see guys that, like you'll see on my page, we've got a triple amputee veteran that's branding a steer with his only arm. And I just believe that there's a lot of people that hesitate to get them involved or even know how to speak or communicate with people like that. It's almost as if they're an alien. And I've never said that before, but they just don't know how to act. And man, I'm treating everybody just like you and I. And we take Michael Jernigan for example. We may have talked about him last time, but I'm going to say 2002. He's a Marine that took shrapnel in his right eye, exited his left, and completely blind since 2004. And I saw him at an event at Reveille Peak Ranch up in Burnett, Texas with Tig. If you remember Tig from Benghazi, he was on the security team detailed team that was told to stand down whenever they went in to save Ambassador Chris Stevens. He had an event here in Texas, and I saw Michael Jernigan with his hand on someone's shoulder following them around, and I'm just intrigued with who this guy is. And the opportunity really didn't present itself there to talk to him, but his wife came up to the bar and we had a drink and just talking a little bit about them and where they're from. And I simply asked her, I said, does he actually enjoy hunting or fishing at all? And she looked at me and she said, Michael loves to hunt. He just doesn't ever get any opportunities. And that's where it starts, man. You just build it out from there. And we put together a hunt where a blind Marine is on a rifle, and we've got an eye scope hooked to the scope, and we've got it's a singer-songwriter that helped guide him in on that animal, up, down, slow left, small right, 4 hours, and he took an animal at 150 yards.
No way.
Those are the examples, because they still find their purpose, and they really show me what resilience is.
You said something that kind of reminded me of a guest we just recently had, Tom Mayer, a doctor, and he says that, there's some people wired when chaos or trauma happens, some people run toward it, some people run away from it. And you just said that when you see somebody that most people will turn a blind eye, somebody sitting on a corner or somebody
Amen.
that is amputee and they don't know how to handle, so they go the other way. You tend to go to that. Purpose has always seemed like this ideal state that we're striving for, yet it's messy and nonlinear. How do you approach these moments when something feels unclear, but the purpose seems to shift inside you? For those people that run away but feel guilty about that, what's some simple tips that to help these people? Because you're right. We need, all they want is to be seen as normal.
Yeah, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate. There's times we've all had these moments where we see somebody and we think, man, I could help them right now, and then you move on. I'll give you an example. And stop me if I've told you something that we may have discussed before, but there's a guy named Donald. Now, this is nearly 6 years ago. I'm driving down the road. I'm headed to a meeting at work. And for anybody that doesn't know, I'm in the storm drainage business. I sell storm drainage and have for 17 years. And I was late for a meeting, and I was heading to work, and I see this tall black man that's with this brand new white T-shirt. You could tell it had just been unfolded. And he's walking with purpose. And he's sweating, and he's walking in the same direction that I'm going down this frontage road. And I pulled in. I thought, I want to give this guy a ride, but I don't have time. So I pulled into the Bill Miller barbecue down the road and got me a breakfast taco and sat down. And I just said a quick prayer before my meal. And I see that man come in the door, and he's out of breath, short of breath. And he said to the manager, he said, "I'm here, ma'am." And she looked at him and she said, "Where's your white collared shirt?" And I could tell his demeanor just shifted from all of that walking, how far he walked from, to shift to, now I've got to walk wherever to get a shirt. And I just grabbed my breakfast, wrapped it up, and I grabbed him and I said, "Hey, Bubba, I'm Garrett." Shook his hand and he said, "I'm Donald." I said, "Let's go." I said, "Come with me." He jumped in the truck, and I said, listen, Donald, I said, I just got a minute. I'm going to run you around to this Walmart that's just around the overpass here. I said, but you may have to get back on your own. And in a 2-minute drive, I figured out that this guy's been 2.5 hours south from Waco, Texas, here in Austin for 3 months and was looking for work. And him and his wife, and he found a little lunch spot, breakfast spot, and I asked him. I said, "Well, man, is this what you want to do?" And he said, "Man, I'm a cook. I love cooking." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, are you open to anything else until that time comes?" And he was like, "I appreciate any opportunity." We switched numbers. I dropped him off, and I went back and saw him 3 days later at that restaurant, and we got him in for an interview, and he's been with us for 5 years now, and he just got offers a position as a warehouse manager in another state and turned it down because he doesn't want to leave.
Oh my God.
Don't hesitate.
Ooh. Garrett, how in the world do you channel the empathy and resilience? I mean, that stuff shakes me up. I mean, as much as Dr. Terry and I, we live our life helping people, this is a different level, man. Or this is just a different. How do you process this?
Did we talk about the prophetic word that was spoke over me in 2002?
I don't care. Say it
2005?
again, man. Talk about it again.
We'll just pretend. I mean, I know there's probably hundreds or thousands of people out there that may be hearing this story for the first time, but after the loss of my buddy Chad, which will be 30 years on April 23rd, when he took his wife's life and his own, I was in an extreme amount of pain. And as you all know, I got strung out on cocaine and meth for a long time, and I got raided by the task force in 2002 in Amarillo, Texas. And I went to a church service. I was just in dire need of help and even spiritual help, heart help. And I'm going to church by myself, and they told the congregation that if anybody was interested in the prophetic service on Wednesday night, that they should come back to Trinity Fellowship. And I came back by myself, and I remember walking in and seeing this mega church with looking down the halls and people. There's 2 people praying for each individual or each couple together. And then I opened up the doors to the sanctuary, and they were peppered throughout praying for them in there. And they are all holding these like Radio Shack cassette recorders back in the day, And so I just backed back out, and I got in a line that was in a hallway, and I didn't know who I was talking to. I've never seen them before. I've never seen them since. But when I finally got up, they just shook my hand and they said, "Come on in here. We're gonna pray for you, and we're gonna record this, and we're gonna send this to you." And it ended up being about a 12-minute cassette recording that I took out of there, and I never listened to it, and I don't remember what they said to me, but that was in 2005 or so. I gave it a shot at selling real estate at Coldwell Banker, and really had to fight for my real estate license due to the trouble that I'd been in, and thankfully received that. But real estate wasn't for me. I'm more of a relationship guy than a task guy, and I figured that out within about 2 years. But so I took this job down here selling storm drainage, and to come back to that prophetic service, I found Trinity Oaks, which was the nonprofit that I really started serving with in 2013 after meeting Tyson Deaver on the airplane. And that story can be found elsewhere. I won't kill a whole bunch of time with it. But when you meet a wheelchair basketball team of 13 dudes, and you figure out they're going to Vegas just to bring the championship back to Texas, and they tell you that, and you end up becoming buddies with one of them, and still one of my best friends today. I got involved with a nonprofit to raise the money for an all-terrain wheelchair for a boy with cerebral palsy, and found a nonprofit. And I want to say it was about 3 years into that nonprofit that I had my divorce, and I was moving in 2017, and I found that cassette. And for the last 3 years, I had been coordinating all of the dream trips for any children or adults that had a last and final wish to hunt or fish in the outdoors with Trinity Oaks. And we were doing 8 to 12 a year on average. And I found that cassette tape, and I burned it onto a CD, and I listened to it for the first time, 10, 12 years later. And what they spoke over me was, this lady said, "Garrett," she said, "I see you. I believe the Lord would tell me that I see you as if you're in an intensive care." She said, "But it's an intensive care for wounded hearts. And I see you bandaging the hearts of wounded men and boys." And they prayed for me at the end. And one of the other things that was said was the gentleman that spoke to me, he said, I believe that the Lord would tell me that the pain that you're going to come into contact with is going to be so great in others that you won't be able to bear it. And he said, God would tell me today that he took all of that on the cross, and that you are to hand over all that pain to him and be a burden bearer for him. So this is truly a calling in my life. And that's how I would answer, how do I process or this, or why do I do this?
With all the people that you have worked with, the children, the adults, is there anybody in particular, other than the guy in the basketball player in the wheelchair, is there anybody else in particular that you've learned something from, a significant lesson? I mean, listen, the last several people that you referred to our show have been, I whenever my patients come in complaining about something, I go, you need to listen to this show. You will be much happier with your life. Anybody in particular come to mind for you?
Yeah. Sam Jabera. He's actually on my board. He's a Purple Heart veteran. He was Army chief warrant officer and was blown up in a suicide bombing in Bagram. Lost 5 guys. There was 3 out of his unit and 2 civilian contractors. He took shrapnel and was flown to Germany, and then now lives in Kempner, Texas with his wife and 2 kids, and was, of course, 100% medically retired from the military after that, but wanted to go. He actually got to go back at some point and kind of finish out, and then retired. But it's guys like that. Scott Casey, he's another one that's on my board that was in the military. He wasn't in combat, but he handled some really, really tough stuff that I'll let him tell that story. But it's guys like that have been through a different type of war. And I've got my own wars, you've got yours. And somehow the war that I've fought has become relatable to the war that the terminally ill are battling, our veterans are battling, and our White Star families, White Stars, the families of the military members that have committed suicide. And those are the people that I gravitate towards, and they're everywhere.
Garrett, so I think we refer to those wars as demons. We carry demons inside sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't claim that. I don't claim demons just specifically because but go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'm glad you clarify that, because I'd rather call it a war than a demon. Yeah. When you get confronted with somebody that has such a compelling history of trauma and their own personal wars, how do you respond in a way that makes you feel better?
Let them talk, listen, shut up, hear them.
Yeah.
Feel them.
I think that needs to be a lesson for everyone. Just listen. Be a good listener. Yeah.
Don't wait to stop talking to tell your relatable story. Just listen and ask more questions. Dig deeper. I won't say nobody, but we're not getting that genuine, I want to know more. And I really want to know more.
Yep.
You guys get that. That's why we're doing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. It's funny because a lot of people like talking about themselves and don't care about listening to what you have to say when you're the one in need.
Yeah.
I see that
we
often.
can all be guilty of that. I've done that, but
yeah. I was just going to say we're all guilty of that out there. Sometimes I just go, shut up, Terry.
I say that too. Shut up, Terry.
Yeah.
We love you, Terry.
I wouldn't take that from anybody that didn't love me.
Yeah.
Hey, Garrett, let me ask you. I know you're pretty real about your history, if you don't mind, because I know there's people out there that experience various levels of abuse. Escaping pain through medication or any of the abuses, gambling, drinking, spousal abuse, whatever it might be. How do you how do you personally, how have you been successful in processing those enticing moments of, going
Slowly.
backwards? Yeah.
Yeah, I've processed them very, very slowly, and it's been gradual, man. This has not been a perfect ride. The longest I've ever been clean is a year and a half ever, and I think we're looking at just over a year and a half right now, and it was a year before that. I'm just real honest about acknowledging when I fail and dusting myself off and trying to forgive myself. It's one thing when everybody else is sick of you doing, but when you're sick of letting yourself down, knowing you're letting other people down, and knowing that we can be the tip of the spear in this space, this is the new dope for me, if you will. And
It's great.
yeah.
Well,
Have you ever found that when you're weak, have you turned to the people you've helped? And is it like, do you look at this journey as a complete circle where not only you're helping others, but they're helping you as the same?
Yeah. I was on a tour bus probably in the last 3 months with some artists, and somebody pulled out some cocaine. It's the first time I'd laid my eyes on it in a year, at least a year. And they asked me if I wanted some, and I looked at it. I said, "Man," I said, "I don't think you're going to have enough for me." And I walked off the bus. And
that's great.
it's not for me.
Yeah.
I don't say no for me. I say no because of the responsibility that I have. I could never say no for me. I never have found the strength. So I find it in this. I find the strength to look for tomorrow and think about what tomorrow's going to be like after I stay up all night doing cocaine. And I just got no room in my life anymore. There's too many opportunities out there to get higher than that doing this, serving these folks.
Let's talk pasta, oats, grains, and more. I'm gluten-free, and this one item I can have without any consequences. Since we always talk about fueling our bodies the right way, that's where Guardian Grains comes in. No kidding. Their products are a massive shift towards healthy eating. Guardian Grains is all about healthy, sustainable grains that not only taste great, but are great for you and the planet. Whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, Guardian Grains has you covered with all kinds of nutrition that keep you going strong. Perfect for long days of just living life. Plus, knowing it's sustainably grown, that's a win-win. Sincere appreciation goes to the Guardian Grains for sponsorship of this episode and for making it easy to stay healthy while supporting sustainable farming. Click the link below the description to buy some of your own. You'll taste the difference.
I've often said that people are motivated by two things, away from pain or towards pleasure. When you're confronted with a situation like that, what's the first thing you think of?
How is this going to impact the next few days? What am I going to miss out on?
Pain. The pain of what you would experience. Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
That's great, man. Good answer. Because, some people would end up thinking, you know what, I'm having too good a time being clean and experiencing life for what it's worth. I'm just going to stay that way. Whereas some people think of the consequences of practicing a behavior that never served them in the past. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in an era where, many are skeptical due to like insincerity and, when they demonstrate genuine care and authenticity to those, how does that help you? When they express themselves to you, how do you feel about that when you've been there for them?
That's a really, really good question. I don't know that I've been asked that. How do I take it when they express their thanks?
Yep.
I've never thought about that, but I guess I would say that I'm thanking them. I just want to say thank you back because all of this gives me so much perspective. And it's like I say to anybody and everybody, this is as good for me as it is them. So we're all getting, and I won't do anything that's not good for everybody. I don't want anybody, whether it's a ranch owner or a venue or a band or an artist, I don't want them to go out of their way. And I never ask them to go out of their way for someone if it's not going to be good for them, because I know that they're going to get fed through this as well. Fed here.
Yeah, I've often thought, to answer that question, that, I'm also curious even how Dr. Terry is, we've been doing this, helping people for a long time obviously at a different level and a different perspective. And it always struck me that, man, when someone could look across, the room or tell me that they're out of pain, and that we figured it out, how to assist them. That's everything, man. That is, to me, that is the greatest good.
Yeah.
How do you, Terry, what do you, I never asked you that. What do you?
I always feel like sometimes people, when they get up and they give you a hug, I'm like, that hug is worth more than the paycheck there that I get. Yeah. I wish I could pay my rent with hugs, because I would do it for free.
Yeah. That's how much I love this. 10 years of that, 11 years of that for free.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's an investment to me.
Yeah.
In their lives and mine.
Hey, Garrett, I just had a thought come into my head, because you'll see somebody walking down the street and they'll just toss some trash out, and they have the attitude, somebody will pick that up. It's somebody in the city's job, or somebody will leave their table a mess and they go, that's the ware's job, or that's the busboy's job. It's always somebody else's job to pick up the trash, right? And yet we'll see a human being sitting there and they'll walk by them, and I'm guilty of this too. And they're like, that's somebody else will take care of that person. Somebody else will help that person, that vet, or that human. And I don't know if it's a mental thing that they think they're beneath them, that there's something disconnected, or we don't want to face that pain. We don't want to face that. How, and I don't even know if how is the right word, but how, like you said, just talk to them. But a lot of people struggle with talking to somebody that requires empathy or difficulty or whatever, and they just view them as a piece of trash. And that's not right, and then you get and I'm sorry I'm rambling, but then you get the person that, they're just, that guy in the corner is just, that's his job. He's making a ton of money by putting their work for help. And you offer him work and they turn it down, or you offer him food. I don't like that food. So then you get this disconnect of people taking advantage of the system, right? And so how do you find that person, and how do you take that first step?
When I wrote the letter that I had to write in the Last Letters podcast with Jeremy Locke, one of the things that stood out, well, first of all, let's go back to somebody else will take care of them. I've always said, and I don't remember where I've heard it, but the question is what's the quickest way to starve a dog? And it's tell 3 people to feed it, because everybody else thinks somebody else is going to do it. The dog starves. So if you think about that and know that you're the one that's supposed to be feeding, then I think you'll look at things a little bit different. And I go back to 2000, well, I guess it was 1997, when I'm sitting in an airport in Nashville, Tennessee, after WBO heavyweight championship of the world. Tommy Morrison and I parted ways over cocaine, and I didn't have any money, didn't have a phone. He was my ticket to Nashville to the Tommy Morrison Knockout Age Celebrity Golf Tournament, July 13th of 1997. I mean, I'm out there with one of the biggest names in the world, and drugs ruined it. And I had to sit in an airport for, I want to say 36 hours with no food. And somebody noticed me that worked at the airport, and he simply said, "Can I help you?" And I answered him. I said, "Man," I said, "to be honest with you," I said, my flight doesn't leave till tomorrow, and I don't have any money, and I'm pretty hungry." And he said, "I'll be back in 15 minutes. And he came back in 15 minutes, and he picked up one of my bags, and he said, "Follow me." And I picked up my other, and we jumped in his Ford truck, and he took me to Sonic, and he fed me, and he listened to me, and he heard my story. And when we got back, to the airport, as he pulled out that bag that he picked up, he also handed me a $20 bill, a folded up 20, and I didn't want to take it. And I said, man, I'd like to get your address so I can get this back to you. And he said, I don't want it back. I want you to pass it on. So pass it on. And that's what I'm doing over and over again.
Man.
That's what I was like.
Garrett,
Well,
God almighty. I'm glad I'm holding it together here. All right. Picture your life 5 years from now. And you're doing the same thing. You're helping more people than ever before. You're clean. You're energized, and you're just like a vacuum. Bringing in, all this great energy. What legacy do you hope to leave behind for those that come after you?
When I think of legacies, I think of families, and I don't have any kids here. I don't have anybody with me. And I've been single for a while, but I think that's just the way it's supposed to be. But when I think about legacy, I think more about kids. But I guess the legacy that I would want to leave is when you can, where you can. And all I got to do is walk out that front door and something's going to happen today. I walk out with anticipation. I'll give you an example. I went to a church service. This is so wild, man. And y'all are the first ones hearing this story. Understand that in 2005, that prophetic word was spoke over me, and I haven't had one spoke over me ever before, and hadn't had one since until 2 months ago. And I go by myself to this small little church. There was only probably 30 people. And the pastor was gone. There was 3 ladies and 1 man at the front. And they said, today we're just going to speak prophetic word over some of you. And I was in the very back by myself. And they're 30 minutes into it. And whenever, this is the anticipation I'm talking about. When they said that at the first of that, I flipped my phone over and I hit record on my audio in anticipation that there was a word coming from me. And the guy said, sir, for you in the back, 30 minutes into this. And he said a few words. And it really kind of opened up the gate. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me, but he said, I believe God would tell you that anything that's marked off the list, he likes your checklist, but anything that's already done, remove it. And this other lady said, I see you as Thor. I've never seen the movie Thor, so I don't know what that means. But she said, and you've got your hammer. And she said, nobody can pick it up but you. And another lady said, what's your name? And I said, my name's Garrett. And she got pretty emotional, and she said, Garrett, she said, my name is Erica. And she said, I see the word protector over your head. Oh my God. And they more or less told me, she said, God would have me tell you that you have everything you need to do what you're supposed to do. Now go and do it. And I was already told that in 2005, that Jimmy Witcher, the pastor that spoke that over me, told me the exact same thing. He said, I feel like you think something missing, and God would say you're complete right now. And I'm just now figuring out 20 years ago, from 20 years later, that I'm complete right now. Even with what I still struggle with, I'm still complete right now in Him.
That's awesome.
That is sensational.
Hey, bud. We had a guest that made a living, and she said that one person can make a difference, and it's Erin Brockovich, and they made a movie about. She stood up and said the water is not right, and one person made a difference. And a lot of people think that they can't make a difference, and yet you're making a difference, especially when faced with sociological and widespread challenges. Yeah. How do you believe that one person can make a difference?
Well, they said, I've heard it said that if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a tent with a mosquito naked. We can all make a difference, no matter how small we are or where we are. You can do it right down the road at the Texaco. Just lock eyes with somebody and ask them how they're really doing. And take
is that a Texas? With them. Is that a Texas saying? Is that one of those things like
that was from a guy named Justin Wren, one-legged ass kicker.
You knew where I was going with that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm as busy as a one-armed paper hanger.
That'll work too, yeah.
I went to school in Houston, man. I learned so I love that. I love those sayings. I don't know where they come up with them because they're profound.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a lot of mosquitoes here in Southern California, so I think I think I'd be good, sleeping naked, in a tent out here.
Not in South Florida.
I do it with one mosquito.
Yeah, one mosquito is all you need. My God, that's great. When do you decide to tell about your history to someone who's in need, versus just using a different approach? In other words, we like to lead by example, but not everybody handles it that way. How would you?
I'm pretty careful about sharing much or any of my story, because then it becomes about me, and that's what I'm trying to stay away from. Realistically, I'll do it. I'll do it in time. Like most of the veterans or any of the terminal families that we ever took whenever I was with Trinity Oaks, they didn't know my story. They didn't need to know my story. They didn't need to know it. There's guys that do, and there's times that do, and I think God lets you know when you're supposed to do your best to relate. But when this all comes, you guys have heard more of my story than the people that I know and serve. I don't really talk about it a whole bunch, but that's why we're doing so much good stuff that I don't have time to talk about that unless it's really needed. So that's why I like to kick off this podcast that I'm going to be starting, so that we can. I've got 35 people that are ready to sit down with me, and I've sat down with 3 so far, and 45 on the list. And Matt Matera. When I think my story's tough, it's like I've said, man, we could all stand in a circle with a big Santa bag with all of our stuff, our crappy stuff in it, and throw it in the middle. Have we talked about this? You heave all of that. All of us heave all of our stuff into the middle of a circle. And if you saw just a touch of what spills out of some of those bags, I think we'd go pick our bag up and walk away and keep our problems. And that's the perspective I get out of this.
Nice.
When you run into somebody with the same, we all have triggers, right? We all have triggers that will set us off and will make us go into our dark places. When you run into somebody with the same triggers as you, how do you put a wall on yours to help them, or how do you use them, and how do you handle your triggers when you're with people of like person?
Give me an example, Terry.
All right. We all have, sometimes when we have somebody, they don't want to talk to us, but, because they don't think we're authentic, or they don't think that we have experience and know what they're going through. And in reality, maybe we do. And so how do you show them a little bit of your authenticity so they open up, because they go, oh, he really does understand? Or can they just read that from you? Or if, like the bus, a trigger may be a line of cocaine, and how do you go, all right, I this is a trigger for me to go down to my dark place. I got to walk away. But how do you balance that, absorbing their triggers to help them without going down the path yourself?
I just know how selfish it is. I know how selfish it would be for me. And I will not be able to help them if I can't help myself. I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And it's like, and I'm already getting, just sometimes the way you look at somebody can show the authenticity that you truly understand. I don't think people really give them that time to look at them, or look at them as a person. And I think sometimes just a look, they understand that. I think sometimes we use, what they say, we have 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth. I think sometimes just listen and give them the look like you really care, versus just telling them that you care. Is that?
Yeah, and touch them with your hand. Man, I put my hands on people. I'll pray for people if I feel like I'm led to pray for them. I'll pray for them right there. It doesn't happen all the time, but if I feel like there's nothing I can do, I'm at least going to pray over you. But I will not break eye contact with you. And that's number one. I'm looking deep into your eyes. I'm with you.
Yeah.
So you got a guy, let me I'm going to word this a little different than Dr. Terry, because now I'm curious. Well, first, let me ask you, have you ever experienced someone that you know is shutting down and you're trying to help, but they can't talk to you or
Yes,
they
sir.
don't want to talk to you? Have you experienced that?
Absolutely.
Okay. How do you break through to those individuals?
I would
Now, I
say
know you,
that
you stare at them in the eye, you put your hand on it. Is there, I love those strategies. What else?
man, really feel when it's not the right time.
Really?
Never push. Never feel if it's not the right time. We can feel that. At least I can. But always follow up. Always follow up. That time will present itself. It may not. They may not be ready today, but if you show consistent care and interest, the time will come.
So what does that look like? You call them frequently, you get in front of them frequently, you knock at their front door frequently. What is it? What's it look like?
All of that. Show up, man.
Really?
Show up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't really done the math on, but in my business and with what I do, I'm placing between 50 and 70 calls a day. But I mean, that's up till 11 at night, and I'm literally just checking in with people, and ideas are coming as I'm doing this, and what we can do together. Even if you're somebody that needs something, you also need to serve as well. You may not know it, but I can come up with an idea where you go on with me and let's go serve somebody, and then that brings you into this, and you're an equal. You get to serve too, and it serves you, and it serves him. Serve.
So if somebody wrongs you and somebody really pisses you off by something they say, how do you not only forgive them, but try and justify that maybe they were just in a bad place themselves and I was just the dummy that they hit. And
That's easy, man. Yeah, that's easy. If there's one thing I'm guilty of, it's a bad temper. And my voice goes up even when I'm passionate about something. My voice goes up, and it can when I'm angry too. What was the question?
How do you forgive and give them a second chance if they wronged you?
Well, first of all, I know that there's seasons. There's seasons of people that I thought that I'd be working alongside and serving alongside for the rest of my life. Both of the organizations that I was with, and some I may have wronged them in ways, and I may have felt that they wronged me in ways. But it's like Brene Brown says that, man, I don't have time. I don't want to kick anybody when they're down. I've put it on people that same way, maybe offended them. I've offended a lot of people. But I either step over them or go around them. But I'm not going to kick anybody when they're down. And I'm usually over it in a day anyway. So I may blow up for 10 minutes, but I'm good in 20. And
So
I
now
can forgive anybody for anything, and I've got to do that in some extreme ways. You know, I just turned 50, and I was told by a carpentry teacher that I'd be dead by the time I was 23 in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, if he had to do it himself. And when I turned 46, that was double what he said he'd do to me. And every day that I lived, because I lived with the fear that dude was going to take my life for years. And I recently found out he passed away about a year ago. And
wow.
And I forgive him too.
How do you, with the people that you work with, and I would imagine, that they're in a phase where they're angry before they go into acceptance. Have they ever lashed out at you or been in a mood or an attitude that you might take their anger personally?
I can't say that I can think of anybody that. Oh yeah, I can. I won't go into too much detail on it, but it was pretty recent actually. It was within the last year, and it was something that was said in front of a group of men, and it was a guy that I really he's of higher status, and he was hard to catch anyway and communicate with, and I couldn't be too hard on him whenever he got to the event, but when when I said something, he lashed out at me, pretty heavy. And so much so that I nearly said, why don't you just pack your stuff and get your ass out of here? Is what I wanted to do. But I had to walk away and go outside. And I'm glad I did, because whatever he was dealing with could have been the same way I lash out. And I'm glad I did, because the next day he texted me on my way home and he said, "Yo, bro, I love you." And I said, "I love you too, man." And he said, "I got one question for you." And I said, "Shoot." And he said, "Have you forgiven yourself yet?" And I didn't know quite what he meant, but I think he meant overall, with the anger that I have inside and that I'm still dealing with, that he was seeing something in me that maybe I was also seeing in him. But it's really the start of why I got therapy. And he sent me a book called The Body Keeps the Score. You've probably heard of it. And I read that book, and then I called my buddy Joe Fairchild. I said, "Man, I think I'm ready to get some therapy." And he said, "Well, I got somebody for you." And I've been seeing a therapist for a year now, and it's because I didn't lose my temper on the guy that lost his temper on me.
Nice. Oh, God. Okay, let me like peel the skin of the onion back. I got to get to the core of something here, because that's a great ass story, man. Let me ask you, that moment that you felt that trigger, that you probably wanted to haul off and punch the motherfucker right in the face, what did you say to yourself to get you to walk away?
Do not say a word, and don't leave quickly. Just sit here in this group and then walk away. And it was one of the hardest things I've done in a very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me 9 months to put this event together, and I get told that the first night into it, it was tough, but it was good.
Oh my God, that's great, man. That is
All right.
great.
And I have a massive amount of respect for this dude.
That's so cool, man.
All right, I want to switch gears a little bit, Spence, and I want to talk about this podcast you're doing. I want people to hear about, because if you don't turn into this guy's podcast, you got it. So I want to just talk about this journey. Talk to us about this podcast. How can they find it? Who are the 35 people you lined up, and what are you going to be talking about?
All right. I talked to Sam about this last night. I was like, man, I don't know whether to say the name or not. I'm going to tell you why, but I'm going to be very open with you guys today. So I think we'll just go back and I'll be brief. But in 2002, when 12 task force members kicked in my door in Amarillo, Texas on Memory Lane at 6:30 in the morning, what they walked into was a meth house. And I had been at that rock bottom moment where I was out of drugs a week or two before, and I was looking at my third rehab. And there was this bottle of blue spray paint that was sitting on the floor. And you got to understand, I mean, my carpet had burn marks all over it from glass pipes that were dropped and broke, and torches. And I mean, it looked like a pawn shop in there. And I was looking at that spray paint and thinking, I'm killing myself thinking that this is life, that this is living. And for some reason, I grabbed that spray paint and I spray painted on my wall, "Dying to live." And when I walked in the door after 3 days, I got out of jail, and I pushed my door open that was already shattered from the battering ram. I pushed my door open and I see rubber gloves laying all over my home, and everything upside down, vents pulled out of the ceilings, sockets pulled out of the walls. I mean, they searched every inch of that house. And I realized, they just saw what's on that wall, "Dying to live." And as over this 20 something years of me getting better, I look at that phrase much differently. And I think about how dying to live to me now means dying to my own selfish desires so that I can have life. And it means the exact opposite of what I meant then. I was killing myself thinking I was living. And so there's a podcast out there called "Dying to Live." And it's out of a church on the other side of the world, but I don't know that they're really active. But I have said to myself for 20 years, if I ever write a book or I ever do something, I'm going to call it "Dying to Live." And so it's going to be called the "Dying to Live" podcast. And we'll be releasing the first one on April 23rd, and it's going to be very fitting. That's going to be 30 years since Chad Sweden, my best buddy, took his life and took his wife's life. And we're going to have Matt Matera on there. So, and Matt's lost 5 family members to suicide and self-harm. And we're going to kick it off with him. And then we'll have Kimberly Howard from Utah. She lost her 5-year-old in a boating accident 10 years ago. She flew in from Utah. I interviewed her. And I did one that I won't be able to release. And I'll tell you, without saying names, it was a buddy of mine that I've known for years and has been at a sober living facility, overseeing it for a year and a half clean. And he came down here to do this podcast and told me, Garrett, he said, man, I don't get a lot of time alone with what I'm doing these days. And he's on fire for Jesus. I mean, on fire for the Lord. And I wouldn't say that I'm on fire. I got to give glory and the credit where it's due. And he came down and took a 4-hour trip, and he called me on the way and said, man, I don't get a lot of time alone, so I'm going to do this podcast and I'm going to start heading back. And I said, okay. I said, whatever you decide. And he said, I'm going to stop in this town and just relax by this lake. And I was watching the interview the next night. That was on a Saturday. He left, and then I did Kimberly's podcast and got her to the airport the next day. And then I'm looking over my buddy's podcast that Sunday night, and it hit me. I haven't heard from him. And I called him at 9 o'clock. He didn't answer. I called him at 9 a.m. the next morning, and he answered. And he said, I've avoided everybody's calls but yours. And he had ended up getting high in Waco, Texas. And it turned into a really unfortunate situation. And a guy that had been to 30 rehabs, 30. And 15 years in and out of prison. And now I won't be able to release that one, but he'll be back.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. Hell of a story.
Thank you.
I almost find it uncomfortable to switch gears into our favorite part of this
You're all right,
program. But we got our rapid fire questions. You know what? Hell with that. I'm going to change the gosh damn mood now. Ready? All right. You already had me in tears a few times already, but I cover up well. That's why I wear my glasses. Anyway. All right. Rapid fire question, Garrett. We got 5 of them. It's going to cause you to think quick on your feet, man. But sometimes we get hung up on conversation because your answers are so prolific. So, all right. You ready for number 1?
Yes, sir.
All right, buddy. If your life had a theme song to it right now, what would it be and why?
Van Halen right now. Yeah.
Love it.
Right
Awesome.
now. That song, and you say why? Number 1, I mean, you spoke it right there. You said right now. What would it be right now? So meant to be. That's what, when I went to that celebrity golf tournament with Tommy Morrison, this 47, 3-1, 39 knockouts. He was 3 fights away from fighting Mike Tyson for the heavyweight championship of the world. Starred in Rocky V, did it all.
Yeah.
And when I went to that Tommy Morrison Knockout Age celebrity golf tournament, on that video, he kicked me from underneath the table in this VIP room, and his family was there. We all arrived by limo, and I'd gotten their food for them. And by the time I'd gotten everybody else's food, the lights were dimming in this. There was probably 150 people in this VIP room, and the TVs came on, and he kicked me. He goes, watch this. And I hadn't seen the video, but it was that song and that piano playing right now by Van Halen and him jogging up a hill and training. And they showed every one of his knockouts, all of his 39 knockouts, a 3 to 5 second clip to that song. And that went straight into the dance by Garth Brooks and Tommy standing at a podium in Tulsa, Oklahoma, announcing to the world that he was HIV positive and he'd never box again. And he said, I also asked that any kids that ever saw me as a role model no longer see me as a role model, but see me as someone who had the opportunity to be a role model and blew it. And that song has stuck out in my mind ever since. And it's one of those that just say, let's do it right now.
Whoa. I will be listening to that song after we're off the air.
You're going to love it. I will too. How about that?
I love
I'm going to listen to that song a completely different way now. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
The song on that same album, I received 2 speeding tickets to because I was driving at the time, cranking that music up. So I won't forget that album anytime soon.
Yeah.
And the second speed, all right, whatever. I still got a high from going 70 miles an hour in a 35. Anyway, so
and I'll say this, mark my words, there'll be a put together video with content and experiences and photos to that song down the road with something I'll do, and I'll make sure you get it.
Oh, I love
Please
that.
do.
Love that.
Please
Thank
do.
you.
That was great. Question number 2. What's one piece of terrible advice you've heard all the time that just drives you crazy?
Terrible advice all the time.
What's something that you hear people say stuff and giving advice, but you're like, this is just terrible. That drives you crazy.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, like I imagine that people go when they're right in the middle of telling you their story, you go, oh, I totally know what I know what you're going through. My suggestion is to, or whatever that follow-up suggestion would be, that you go, that ain't gonna work.
Well, one of the things that I hate, I wouldn't say hate, but I hate hearing it, is when somebody's lost someone and someone says, oh, well, they're in a better place now. That's not what anybody wants to hear. Maybe some, but very few.
Right.
There you go.
Right on. There we go. Question number 3. Garrett, if you had 24 hours to help a total stranger turn their pain into purpose, no limits, bro. No limits, no rules. What would you do first?
Realistically, I would grab them and we would run serve someone else together.
What a cool idea.
For instance, I got a buddy named BJ. BJ was going through a tough time. Combat vet. He had lost his son while he was in combat, flew home, buried him, went back to combat. And I'm guessing 5 years ago, he was having a rough enough time that he was talking about it too much, like vocalizing it too much, I felt like, and staying in it. And he told me that a buddy of ours was going to go grab him, and they were going to go to Top Golf. And for some reason, I was just like, I'm an hour from this guy, but I called him back and I was like, no, scratch Top Golf. I'm coming to get you. And he said, okay. So I drove to New Braunfels and I picked him up, and he said, where are we going? I said, we're going downtown San Antonio. And we went downtown San Antonio at 11, 12, 1. And he said, what are we doing? I said, we're going to find somebody that needs us. And we just cruised the streets. He was like, what about that guy? What about that guy? And we were in groups. I said, let's find an individual. That way they don't all just run up to us. Let's find an individual and get to know their story. We finally found a guy that was sitting in a chair with a blanket over his legs, and he was just sitting there looking at the road and watching cars go by. His name was Kenny. We stopped and he said, hey man, BJ said, you need anything? You hungry? The guy was like, yeah, I'm hungry. Long story short, the guy, he jumped in the seat, BJ jumped in the back, we put him in the front, introduced ourselves, and we went for a ride. It was like, tell me what you need right now. He said, man, I need a 6-pack of beer. And I was like, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go get you that 6-pack of beer just because we want to hear your story and spend some time with you. But we're also going to get you some other things we need. We went to Walmart. We got him socks, toothbrush, got, deodorants, all that stuff. And we just heard his story. And he was an officer. He was an officer in the military that gave it all up for heroin. And we prayed for, we spent an hour and a half with him and heard his story and prayed for him and left. And BJ was shaking his head all the way home. So just like those bags I told you about earlier, like I can keep my problem. I'd take him to serve with me.
What a brilliant way to.
I have to interject. Have you talked to Kenny since?
Never saw him again, sir.
Wow.
He didn't have a phone. Never saw him again.
Question number 4. If your younger self met you today, what would surprise him the most about who you are today?
I'm going to say everything. I'm not putting myself first anymore. And there's this feeling inside of me that I take better care of others than I do myself, but in a whole different way. I think he'd be surprised by everything, but he'd be really grateful. And he'd be really thankful. And it'd be tough to not be emotional for him. Us.
Question number 5. You ready, Garrett? Last
Yes,
one.
All right.
If you could have a completely unfiltered, no judgment conversation with anyone in history, anyone, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Well, first it'd be Jesus, and I'd just ask him, how could you forgive me, and why me?
This is supposed to be uplifting, and I'm ready to choke up right now. Every answer has got such a great part of it. Well, Garrett, thank you so much, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, really appreciate all that you've shared from the heart, from your soul, man. That is.
And guys, I'm no pastor. I'm a Terry. You know me. I got a lot of flaws, but I've got to give the credit where the credit's due, and it's very uncomfortable. I don't do flattery. I don't want to hear a bunch of great stuff about what all we're doing this together, but I'm only doing this because of the gift that he put in my heart and the calling he put on my life.
Well, it's very obvious, and you always say when you just said when you want to help somebody, you grab them and serve somebody else. So just understand that we're gonna when your time is right for this podcast, we're gonna grab you and we're gonna share it with other people, so we can hopefully help somebody else hear your stories. And we talked on the phone the other day. It's amazing. This podcast has connected this huge spider web of just great individuals, and hopefully we just keep getting bigger and bigger and help the Kennys of the world. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and I'll be sending some more your way now that we've done something fresh again. I promise you that. You just tell me when you're ready. If you got too many, let me know now.
Well, I'll just say one thing. It's going to come up to if Spencer is ready, because he takes a couple of weeks to recover from these. So we have to make sure he's ready. But I will always take your guest, buddy, and you know that. And so thank you for your message and all your authenticity as always. So love you. You know that.
Thank you, guys. I love you guys. I thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for speaking into lives and hearing stories.
Well, you're welcome. It's not going to end, and we will have you on again because I just love you. So
I love you too.
All right, brother. You have a blessed day. Go outside and do what you do, because I know you're going to make somebody happy today. So thank you,
David. Thank you, Dr. Barron. Thank you, guys. All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Crackin Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.